Silence is the highest form of power. Not the silence of someone who has nothing left to say. Not the silence of someone shrinking or hiding or too afraid to speak. A different kind entirely. The silence of someone who has plenty to say and chooses, on purpose, not to say it. Held consistently, that choice becomes a kind of authority no amount of talking could ever purchase. Most of us are trained, almost from birth, to believe power sounds like something. Power raises its voice. Power interrupts. Power has the fastest comeback in the room, and the last word that leaves everyone else with nothing more to add. We grow up watching people perform strength through volume, so we learn, without ever being told outright, that if we want to be taken seriously, we had better speak first, speak often, and speak the loudest. But watch long enough, and the pattern breaks down. The loudest person in a room is rarely the one actually running it. The one who answers every insult, argues every accusation, chases down every rumor to correct it, is not in control of anything. They are on defense, permanently, reacting to whatever gets thrown at them, spending their entire presence responding to other people's moves instead of making their own. Real power looks different. It looks like stillness. It looks like someone hearing a comment designed to provoke them and simply not taking the bait. Not because it didn't land, not because they didn't notice, but because they understand something most people never learn. A reaction is a gift, and not everyone has earned the right to receive one from you. Think of water. A pond that's constantly disturbed by wind, by stones thrown across its surface, by anything that touches it, never holds a clear reflection. It's too busy responding to whatever is landing on it. But water left undisturbed, untouched by every passing provocation, becomes a mirror. It reflects the sky exactly, because it isn't spending its energy reacting to every ripple. People work the same way. Someone who reacts to everything is never still long enough to be read clearly, and, ironically, by trying to prove themselves in every exchange, becomes the hardest person in the room to actually see. But someone who has learned to hold silence becomes like that undisturbed water. Calm on the surface, unreadable unless they choose to let you in. That unreadability isn't a wall built out of fear. It's a boundary. And boundaries are allowed to exist, even around the parts of you that other people would prefer to have access to. This is the first thing worth understanding about silence as power. It isn't withholding out of fear, it's withholding by choice. There's a wide gap between the silence of someone too afraid to speak and the silence of someone who has simply decided that this moment, this comment, this person doesn't warrant their voice. Now here's what almost nobody tells you. Silence doesn't only protect the person holding it. It unsettles everyone standing around them who is quietly counting on a reaction. Think about how much of human interaction actually runs on reaction. Someone says something cutting and watches your face for the flinch. Someone spreads a story and waits to see if it reaches you. If you'll come running to deny it, defend yourself, set the record straight for anyone who'll listen. Someone provokes you mid-argument, testing for the exact combination of words that will make you raise your voice, lose your composure, and prove whatever story they've already decided to believe about you. All of it depends on one thing: that you give something back. It tells another person exactly how much power they hold over you, and precisely which buttons produce which results. The moment you stop reacting, you stop supplying that information. And a person who can no longer read you is a person they can no longer predict. A person they can no longer predict is a person they can no longer control. This is the actual mechanism behind silence as power. It isn't mystical. It's information warfare, and most people are fighting it by accident, handing over intelligence on themselves every time they respond to something that never deserved a response in the first place. There's a version of this you've probably already witnessed without naming it. Someone in a meeting stays quiet while everyone else scrambles to fill the silence after a hard question, and somehow, by saying the least, they're the one everyone remembers as having been in command of the room. Someone at a family gathering lets a pointed comment go completely unanswered, and somehow, they're the one who looks unbothered afterward, while the person who made the comment is left holding words that landed on nothing at all. Silence has a strange way of returning provocation to sender, unopened. This is also why silence unsettles people far more than confrontation does. Confrontation, at least, gives them something to work with. They know how to argue, how to defend, how to escalate a fight that's already underway. Arguing is a language almost everyone speaks fluently, but silence gives them nothing to push against. It's the door that doesn't answer when they expected a shouting match on the other side of it. And there is very little more disorienting to someone used to controlling a room through noise than a person who simply refuses to make any. You will notice this the moment you actually start practicing it, and it rarely comes from strangers first. It comes from the people closest to you, the ones who have grown used to a version of you that always answers, always explains, always meets noise with more noise in return. When that version of you goes quiet, they will not simply accept it and move on. They will test it. Sometimes gently, sometimes hard, they will push, looking for the exact words that will drag the old reactive you back out into the open where they know how to handle you. That test is where silence stops being a nice idea you read somewhere and starts becoming a discipline you actually have to hold under pressure. Understanding why silence unsettles others is the easy part. Staying silent while someone is actively trying to provoke you out of it is another matter entirely. That's where we're going next. There's a particular kind of pressure that only shows up once you've decided to stop reacting. It doesn't appear when things are calm. It appears the moment someone is actively trying to provoke you, and you can feel, physically, the old pull to respond rising before your mind is even caught up to it. Maybe it's an accusation that isn't true, and every part of you wants to correct it immediately, loudly, before anyone in earshot has the chance to believe it. Maybe it's an insult aimed precisely at the place you're most sensitive, and the urge to fire back is instant, almost involuntary, like flinching from a hot stove. Maybe it's simply a silent-shaped test, someone asking, again and again, in slightly different words, why you won't just explain yourself, why you're being so distant, why you can't just talk about it, hoping that if they ask enough times, in enough tones, you'll finally crack open and hand them what they're after. This is the exact moment silence stops being a preference and becomes a discipline. Anyone can be quiet when nothing is happening. Almost no one can stay quiet when everything inside them is screaming to respond. It's worth understanding what that urge actually is, because it's rarely about the content of what you'd say. It's about discomfort. Silence, in a moment of provocation, creates a kind of pressure, a gap your nervous system wants closed immediately, the same way you'd want to shut a door letting in cold air. Every instinct says, fill it now, say something, anything. Just don't let this silence sit here unanswered in front of witnesses. But that instinct isn't wisdom. It's discomfort dressed up as urgency, wearing urgency's clothes so convincingly that you mistake one for the other. And if you follow it every time, you will spend your whole life reacting to other people's provocations instead of responding on your own terms, in your own time, if you decide to respond at all. Here's something worth knowing about people who provoke on purpose. Many of them are not actually looking for an answer. They're looking for a reaction, because a reaction confirms they still hold some influence over you. An accusation met with an immediate heated denial tells the accuser they've found a nerve worth pressing again later. An insult that lands and produces a visible flinch confirms they know exactly where you're soft. Provocation is often a kind of test, whether or not the person doing it could ever explain that consciously, and the test was never really, is this true? The test is, does this still work on you? When you don't react, you fail their test in the best possible way. Not because you're weak, and not because you have nothing to say, but because you've removed the one thing they were fishing for. No reaction means no information. No information means no leverage. And a person with no leverage over you eventually stops trying, because the effort quietly stops paying off, and people rarely keep spending energy on a strategy that's gone unprofitable. This is why, in almost every serious negotiation and almost every serious conflict, the person who breaks a long silence first is usually the one who ends up giving something away. Silence creates pressure, but it presses on everyone standing in the room, not only you. If you can simply outlast that pressure, you stop being the only one being tested. Play this out somewhere you'll actually recognize. At a family dinner, when someone brings up an old mistake, hoping to watch you squirm, hoping for the defensive explanation that gives them something new to argue with, you can let the comment exist in the air, unclaimed, unanswered, and move the conversation forward as if it never quite landed, because for you, it doesn't have to. In a relationship, when a partner says something sharp on purpose, hoping you'll match their volume so the disagreement becomes about tone instead of substance, staying level, Staying quiet until the heat passes is not avoidance. It's refusing to let the conversation get hijacked by whoever raises their voice first. In a group chat, when someone twists your words into something you never meant, the old instinct says, correct it immediately, publicly, thoroughly, before it spreads any further. But most misunderstandings engineered on purpose are not solved by more words. They're solved by time and by your continued, calm, unbothered presence contradicting the story far better than any explanation ever could. At work, when a colleague questions a decision that was entirely yours to make, hoping enough pressure will make you over-justify and reveal a doubt they can use later, a short, calm answer, or sometimes no answer beyond your continued follow-through, says more than any defense ever could. Competence rarely needs a microphone to be heard. And in the hardest moments, betrayal, dishonesty, someone circulating a version of you that isn't true, the pull to defend yourself to everyone who might have heard it is almost unbearable. But chasing every distorted story to correct it is exhausting, and it rarely even works, because people who wanted to believe the worst were never going to be persuaded by your evidence in the first place. Your continued, steady presence, over enough time, corrects far more than your words ever will. None of this means silence is passive, or that you simply absorb whatever comes at you and say nothing, forever, about anything. It means you've stopped treating every provocation like an emergency that requires an immediate response. You choose your moments. You choose your words on the rare occasions you spend them, and that choice, held consistently over time, starts to change something deeper than any single conversation. It starts to change who you are in every room you walk into afterward. Something happens to a person who practices this long enough. It doesn't happen overnight, and there's no announcement when it does. But slowly, silence stops being an effort, a discipline you have to consciously reach for in the heat of a moment, and it becomes simply who you are. Once that shift happens, everything around you starts to change with it. The first thing that changes is your own internal experience. All the energy that used to go into rehearsing arguments, replaying conversations, drafting the perfect response to something someone said 3 days ago that you still haven't let go of, comes back to you. You don't fully realize how much of your mind had been rented out to other people's provocations until the lease finally ends. What fills that space instead is quiet, actual quiet. Not the anxious kind where you're bracing for the next thing you'll have to respond to, but the settled kind, where you're simply present in your own life instead of narrating a constant defense of it. The second thing that changes is how people treat you. Not everyone. Some people were only ever drawn to you because you were reactive, because you could be provoked, because your noise gave them something to bounce off of and respond to. Those people tend to drift once the noise stops, and that's fine. Let them. What replaces them, or deepens among the people who remain, is a different quality of respect. Not the loud kind, where people compliment your comebacks after the fact. The quiet kind, where people simply start choosing their words more carefully around you, not out of fear, but because they sense you no longer hand out reactions cheaply. So whatever you do choose to say carries more weight than it used to. This is worth sitting with, because it's easy to miss. Silence increases the value of your words. A person who responds to everything has a voice that means a little less each time, because it's always available, always spent, always on tap for anyone who wants a reaction out of them. A person who stays quiet through most provocation and speaks only when it actually matters has a voice people lean in to hear, because they know it isn't handed out for free. It's worth pausing here to clear up a misunderstanding, because none of this is about becoming cold, distant, or unreachable. Silence, practiced this way, is not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of choice. You can still be warm. You can still laugh loudly, love openly, tell the people who matter exactly how you feel about them, share your reasoning freely with anyone who's actually earned it. None of that contradicts anything here. What changes is that you stop handing your voice, your energy, your explanations to every person who simply demands them, whether that's someone trying to provoke you on purpose, or an audience that was never going to be satisfied no matter what you said to them. The people who benefited most from your old habit of reacting to everything are rarely the people who loved you well. More often, they were the people who needed your reaction to feel like they still had some kind of hold on you, some way of confirming they could still move you if they tried hard enough. There's an old version of you who would have found all of this unbearable, who needed the last word the way some people need the last light turned off before they can sleep. That version of you is not a failure you've left behind in shame. It was doing its best with what it knew, protecting you the only way it understood how, by staying loud enough, fast enough, ready enough to never be caught off guard. You don't have to disown it. You just don't have to live there anymore. There's an image worth carrying with you here. Even in the middle of the most violent weather, there's a place at its core that stays still, not untouched by what's happening around it, just not caught up in the spinning. Everything on the outside is chaos, wind, noise, motion, damage. But the center holds its own quiet, regardless of what's happening at the edges. That's what this becomes, eventually. Not a life free of conflict or drama or people who try to provoke you, because that life doesn't exist for anyone, no matter how much silence they practice. But a center, inside you, that doesn't get pulled into every storm, just because the storm is loud and close and demanding your attention. You learn to watch it happen around you without becoming part of its spin. That stillness, held consistently, was never a personality trait. Some people are simply born with, and others aren't. It's built, the same way any real discipline is built, through repetition, through choosing it again and again, especially in the exact moments it would be easiest not to. So the next time someone tries to provoke a reaction out of you and gets nothing back but your steady, unbothered presence instead, understand what's actually happening in that moment. You are not losing. You are not failing to defend yourself. You are demonstrating something that cannot be argued with, because it was never an argument to begin with. It's a boundary, held without a single word spent defending it. And boundaries held in silence tend to outlast every boundary anyone ever had to explain out loud. Let people wonder what you're thinking. Let them fill your silence with their own guesses, their own stories, their own discomfort at not knowing exactly where they stand with you anymore. That discomfort belongs to them. It was never yours to resolve. You do not owe the room a running commentary on your inner life, simply because the room finds your quiet unfamiliar or unsettling or harder to read than the version of you they were used to. This is the highest form of power there is, not the power to make people listen to you, but the power to no longer need them to. Not the power of the loudest voice in the room, but the power of someone who doesn't require the room's approval to know exactly who they are. Silence isn't empty. It never was. It's simply full of everything you've decided not to spend on people who never deserved it in the first place. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them lose their footing in the exact space where your reaction used to live. You don't owe the noise around you. You only owe yourself the peace. Silence isn't empty. It never was. It's simply full of everything you've decided not to spend on people who never deserved it in the first place. There's a difference worth sitting with here between power and respect, because most people treat them as the same thing, and they aren't. Respect can't be taken at all. It has to be given freely by someone who has actually watched you hold your ground long enough to believe it wasn't an act. You cannot argue your way into respect. You cannot demand it no matter how loudly you try. Most people chasing power through noise are not building respect. They're building compliance, and compliance has a short memory. It obeys you while you're standing there to enforce it, and forgets you the moment you leave the room. Silence builds the other kind. The kind that survives your absence because it was never propped up by your presence forcing it into existing in the first place. Think of the people you actually respect most in your own life, and notice how rarely it's the ones who talked the loudest, argued the hardest, or needed the whole table nodding along before they could relax. More often, it's the ones who seemed settled, sure of themselves in a way that never once asked for your approval to hold steady. That's what you're building now. Every time silence wins out over the urge to perform, not a show staged for an audience, a foundation you can feel, whether or not anyone else ever notices it's there. Most of the time, no one will notice out loud. Nobody walks up afterward to tell you. Your silence unsettled them, that your stillness cost them their grip, that they respect you more now than they did when you handed them everything they asked for. That confirmation almost never comes. You hold the discipline without the applause. You trust the shift without ever seeing the receipt. There's an old version of you underneath all of this. The one who used to hand their peace to anyone loud enough to demand it, who once believed being seen meant being heard on command. That version wasn't foolish. It did the only thing it knew how to do, but it doesn't have to keep doing it. Give it something better than applause this time. Give it quiet. Let them wonder. Let them guess. Let them lose their footing in the exact space where your reaction used to live. You don't owe the noise around you. You only owe yourself the peace.